Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's Unseminary Podcast.
Well, hey everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. My name's Rich, the host around these parts. So glad that you've decided to spend some time with us to put us in your earbuds. Today we've got Sarah Stanley. She is the youth support pastor from a church in the kind of greater Toronto area called the Meeting House. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Rich. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad you decided to spend some time with us today. Now, why don't you do two things? Tell us first a little bit about, for people who don't know, a little bit about the Meeting House, and then a little bit about your role there.
Absolutely. So the church, the Meeting House, like you said, just in the greater Toronto area, it's a multi-site church with about 14 locations now. And the slogan is sort of a church for people who aren't into church. So maybe people who've had a bad experience in the church previously or haven't been connected in a long time. So just trying to spread the irreligious message of Jesus.
Nice. And for people that don't know, you probably have picked up if you've listened long enough to the Unseminary stuff. I actually worked at the Meeting House for a while, way back when in the ancient history of this church. So really super biased. I really do think it's a great church, and Sarah's an incredible leader, and so I'm so glad, so privileged to have her on the line today. Actually, we have Bruxy coming on as well in a couple weeks. Their teaching pastor, which I'm excited about that as well. So one of the things that I love about what you're doing at the Meeting House. Oh, you didn't tell us about your role. What's your role there?
Yes. So my role, like you said, is the youth support pastor. So essentially what I do is support our youth pastors and youth coordinators across all of our sites, junior and senior high. So encouraging, equipping, resourcing them as they do ministry on the ground at their locations.
Nice.
So,
That's
fun.
Fantastic. That's probably keeps you busy.
It absolutely does.
Nice.
But we've got some really good people.
That's great. Great. Well, one of the things that I love about what you're doing in the student ministry at the Meeting House is you really do such a great job, it seems to be at least, doing a great job getting students connected in compassion or outreach, being involved in, serving in the community. Why don't you give us a sense of the kinds of things you've been doing to see students get connected in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with the multi-site thing, it looks a little bit different at all of our sites. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we want each of our youth ministries at each of our locations to have a very intentional compassion element to it, just recognizing that as kids discover and learn what it means to follow Jesus and be disciples, part of that means learning what it means to serve and not just saying, hey, this is just something I do, but it's actually because I love and follow Jesus and it's part of who I am as a result of that. So I can speak, I guess, more personally to what that looked like for me the last 4.5 years. I was in the junior high role at our Oakville location. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was kind of, what does it look like to get junior highs involved in compassion? And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky because just with age and experience and what opportunities are available to them. But something kind of neat that I've appreciated that the Meeting House has done is just being really intentional both with local and global compassion. And specifically with local compassion, with all of our 14 different sites, taking a look at each site and saying, hey, in the city, in the community that we're in, what is the greatest need? And that's different depending on our different sites. So at, like, say, our Perry Sound site, First Nations is a lot more prevalent, and they have some really cool opportunities to get involved, serving on some of the reserves and working with youth up there. For us in Oakville, that's just not as readily available to us. It doesn't mean that's not something that we should be learning and getting involved with, but for us, just recognizing that there's a lot of youth and just vulnerable families in our communities. And so what that looked like for us, especially with junior highs, is getting involved in a local organization. There's one in Oakville called Kerr Street Ministries that already does an amazing job of serving new Canadians, families that are new to Canada, maybe families that are single parent families or just for a variety of different reasons struggling. And so we've said, what does it look like for us to help our students get really meaningfully involved there? And not just to kind of pop in and serve, but also to build relationships with some of those kids and some of those families.
Now, just before we jump on,
absolutely.
How at each of those locations are the various kind of youth workers, and I'm assuming there's like the lead pastors or the campus pastors are engaged in that conversation as well. How are they, coming up with or defining kind of areas of need in their community?
Yeah, absolutely. So each site at the Meeting House has what's called a compassion coordinator, which is awesome because that helps our youth coordinators. A lot of our youth coordinators are either part-time or volunteer. And so they're able to connect with the compassion coordinator just as a resource who's very aware of the city, the community, the organizations that the Meeting House as a site is already partnering with, and saying, hey, how can we help the youth get involved in something that our community is already, connected to and involved with. So that's been awesome and just a really great resource. And sometimes they try things and it works amazingly, and sometimes it was a cool experience, but maybe not like a long-term plan for them. So that's sort of what it looks like right now.
Cool. Okay, cool. Nice. Sorry to interrupt. So what are some other ways that you're, some of the other kind of practical things that they're doing?
Absolutely. So so for our students at the Oakville site with Kerr Street Ministries, what we started doing is taking the kids once a month. Every Monday, Kerr Street Ministries runs a family night. So they put on a dinner for families where they can just come and be together and eat and just have that time and as a gift. And then they stay afterwards, and there's often something that's happening for the parents that's put on by Kerr Street. But the kids were just sort of going to the gym and like running amok. And so, which is awesome. But we just sort of saw that as an opportunity for our kids to come in, and when the parents are having that time as parents to come in and say, hey, as junior highs, we can come along these kids that are part of our city and part of our community. And so they just come and they run crafts and they run gym games, and they're kids and they just get to play, but it's helping them and they have a blast. Like they're like, can I do the sample for the craft? Because they want to do the craft. Right. But it is a really neat thing. It has been for me just to see them step into those opportunities of leadership, but also just servanthood and recognizing that like this isn't actually just about me making a craft because I want to, or me having like playing this game or whatever. It's like putting this child that walks through our doors and putting them first and helping them to have the best experience, and really establishing that relationship. And it's been neat to see them, like they come every month because they're excited to see that kid that they know by name. Very cool. And we're able to connect with those parents. And another practical thing that we've been able to do is each summer, Kerr Street Ministries runs a day camp. And so again, we've been able to bring some of our junior high and senior high students to help come alongside and run that day camp with them for a couple of weeks in the summer. So again, just trying to establish those relationships on an ongoing basis. So that happened over a couple of years. And then the last 2 years, we actually said to Kerr Street, hey, do you have specific families? Like we're seeing them in and out through the day camp, through this after like school evening program. But is there a way that our small groups and our students can on a consistent basis be praying for and getting to know some of these families specifically? And so we were able to match up one family from Kerr Street with one small group in our ministry, both for junior high and senior high. So I think we ended up having close to 30 families in the last couple of years that were matched up with specific small groups. And it just meant, it wasn't anything crazy. It just meant that, hey, if a kid in your family has a birthday, we're sending them a birthday card, and every kid in your small group is signing it, and we're putting together a little pack of little like toys or just things that might encourage them and just say, hey, we know it's your birthday and we want to celebrate you.
Very cool.
At Christmas, they've put together like Christmas baskets for the family. And so just trying to look for those ways that say, hey, it's not just saying that we're serving because we follow Jesus and that's what we're supposed to do, but what does it look like for that to be part of our DNA and something that like becomes our heartbeat?
Now, it seems like there's a really like a high focus on the kind of relational connection, which I think a lot of times when churches think about doing kind of compassion work or outreach work, it's more of the kind of like bless and run, like we're going to do this thing. And then is that intentional? And is that just because that's your particular heartbeat, or is that like a strategy from what you're trying to do at the Meeting House in general?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, if we can do it through relationships, that's where we want to be. Just recognizing that we don't want it to be, like you said, like where you just parachute in and feel like you're saving the day, but helping students understand. And it's been really neat to see them like grasping this concept of actually, I might think that I'm coming in just to help these kids have an awesome night, but I'm actually walking away feeling like that was more of a blessing for me than it was for them. And seeing the people that they're serving actually as a brother or a sister or a friend, and not just someone that I'm trying to help because that's what Jesus would do. And yes, that's true. Right. But recognizing that there's so much more to it. And so yes, it's absolutely intentional. And again, sometimes we are involved in things where it might be a little bit more of a, hey, here's an opportunity, we can go serve and we might not be back. But for the most part, if we can find those things where there's relationships being established, that's the goal for sure.
Very cool. Now, give us a sense. It all sounds like it goes so well and it's very easy and it happens, without any troubles. But give us a sense. There must be a time where, maybe you stepped on a little bit of a landmine, something didn't go so well. What was one of those, examples, so that we can learn, so we can try to avoid that in our churches?
Absolutely. Oh man, I will pick one. I think part of it is just, one of just the really practical things in our context, and I'm sure that that's true for a lot of people, is that in youth ministry, there's a lot of transition. And so I know for me, even transitioning into the new role that I'm in now, some of the things that we were doing look different now because there's different people in those roles and the ministry that we're partnering with looks different. And so I don't think it's a thing where we ever are going to get to a place where it works and this is what we do always. I think it's always morphing. One I know specifically, and again, if anyone works with junior highs, you'll get this. When they were doing the Christmas baskets, they'd all signed up for the things that they were going to bring to make sure we had, everybody in the families covered. And then, of course, it's like, this is the night that you're bringing stuff. And then you've got some groups that do an amazing job and they've got this basket. And then, the grade 6 boys just brought some candy canes. And
exactly.
And so just being really mindful of what it is that we're committing to the organization that we're working with and to the families that we're working with, and then helping that become a learning opportunity for our students of what they're committing to and why it's important and how they make that work. So there's definitely been some major landmines along the way.
Cool. Now, is there anything else you'd love to share with folks who might be thinking about trying to engage their students more in compassion before we jump on to the rest of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I have learned and that we need to just continue getting better at is not just providing the opportunities for them to engage, but also providing the opportunities for them to talk about it and to process and what are they taking away from it and what are they learning from it and what about that was really hard and how is it different from what maybe they were expecting walking in. Because I know, it's easy to walk in and walk out, but if you're not taking that time to help them process what that means and how it's shaping them, that's a significant piece of it for sure.
Yeah, what does that look like, in your environment? I think that's a great insight. What does that look like when you're working with students?
Lots of questions.
Yeah.
Lots of questions, and recognizing that it's okay if they don't have all the answers or they don't know how to articulate, and then allowing them to share with each other how those experiences are significant. And so for us, that has looked like having some of the senior high students come and share with the junior high students who maybe aren't able yet to put words to, oh yeah, that was fun, but I have no idea why. Right. And having the senior highs be able to come alongside and encourage and maybe put words to what some of the junior highs are experiencing. And then I think just the consistency of you're not just experiencing it once, but it's on an ongoing basis, and being able to ask questions about, hey, how does this look different for you now than it did back in September, come the end of the year. So I think just lots of questions and intentionality and consistency.
This is the Unseminary Podcast. Stuff you wish they taught in seminary.
Well, let's jump on into the lightning round, that part of the show where we ask similar questions to everybody who's on the show today. We're super privileged to have Sarah Stanley with us from the Meeting House. She's a pastor there, involved in their student ministry at all their various locations. And so it's been a great conversation today. So, Sarah, what's an online resource you're using these days that's been particularly helpful for you in your ministry?
Absolutely. You know what? I think most recently, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of this, but the Center for Parent and Youth Understanding by Walt Mueller, we're just recognizing with student ministry specifically, there are just an ongoing just waves of issues and things that our students are struggling with. And so for me, in my role, it's looked like, how do I resource parents? How do I resource leaders on all of these different topics when I'm not an expert on all of these different topics? And so that's been just a huge resource, cpyu.org, that has tons of articles on lots of different things that I've found really helpful.
Very cool. Have you read any books in the last 6 months to a year that have had an impact on your ministry?
I have. I have been actually rereading Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership by Ruth Haley Barton. Our youth team is reading it through right now, and just recognizing that in the ongoing kind of crazy pace of life, to come back in ministry to our hearts and how are we growing in our relationships with God, that's been a really meaningful thing that we've been doing as a youth team together.
Yeah, if you don't know Ruth Haley Barton, you really should be connecting with her. She's incredible. I had the privilege of being on retreat with her earlier this year, and it was a highlight. It was I was really
so good. I'm jealous.
I know, and you know what's funny? I was resistant going. I was like, there was a snowstorm, and I'm like, well, maybe my flight will be canceled because I've got things to do besides be quiet. and then, but it ended up being incredible. We flew out, and it was in January, and it was so freezing cold, it's like minus 40 in Chicago. But it was I really appreciate her. She's a fantastic leader. If you haven't had a chance to connect with her or her ministry, you should, for sure.
Absolutely.
Are there any other ministries out there that you're looking to that are, kind of inspiring you or shaping your thinking today?
Yeah, so many. Absolutely. Let me try and pick one. I think for me, I don't even know if I can pick one. I think just trying to learn from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like just for me, it's been having conversations with lots of different youth pastors, and people are doing similar things at different churches. Yeah, I can't even figure out.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
it's
totally
just
fine.
that ongoing conversation and learning from best practices, and coming back to whether it's with students or other leaders, like just asking lots of questions from all kinds of places, and not getting sort of zoned in on just where I am and what I'm doing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, if you could get 15 minutes with any leader alive today, who would you want to get that time with, and why?
I think I would actually love to sit down with Bill Hybels. When I was in grade 8 through high school, we attended Willow Creek Community Church. Oh, okay. So it was neat, like as a student. But I think I just have a huge respect for his passion for the local church. And sometimes I think when we're working in the local church, you see all the mess of it and all the chaos of it, and it's hard. And so just to ask hard questions about leadership and about how you maintain just that ongoing passion and heart for the local church and how God's at work in it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you have a lot to organize. When you're trying to organize and support 14 different campuses, I'm sure that keeps you busy. It's not like you've got a lot of extra time, but when you do just kind of, want to kick back, relax, enjoy life, what do you do for fun?
That's a great question. I like to read. I like to run. I have a 7-month-old Greater Swiss Mountain Dog puppy. So
nice.
That's crazy. He's kind of like a horse or a dinosaur. So I just like to be outside and, read and hang out with them.
That's great. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you being on the show today. If people want to get in touch with the Meeting House or with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. All kinds of ways. The website for the Meeting House is themeetinghouse.com. And so there's, tons of ways that you can get in touch with different people on there. On Twitter, it's @themeetinghouse. And then if there's any questions specifically about youth, my email is just sarah.stanley@themeetinghouse.com, or you can just email youth@themeetinghouse.com, and that'll get to me as well. So yeah, definitely, we'd love to hear from you.
Nice. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out Unseminary Inbox. You can sign up at unseminary.com, and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter @RichBirch or through email rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.